بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على سيدنا مولانا محمد المصطفى وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum to those of you who have joined today's podcast with the Monthly Reflections podcast. So good to have you here. So good to have you join, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum to those who've just joined now. Inshallah, wa alaikum salam, my dear brother. Inshallah, you guys are well. Today's a good one. Today's a good one, isn't it? Inshallah, our dear Sheikh Mahdi will join very, very soon. And we are so excited to have him on the podcast. How are you guys doing? How's Shahr Ramadan going? I think in most places night of Qadr is done, and it's probably the day of Qadr in some places, as in the day of the 23rd or 24th night. But how have your nights of Qadr? How are your nights of A'mal? How have they been? Inshallah they are well. Sis Fatima, assalamu alaikum. Yeah, like how are you guys doing? How's Ramadan going? It's like literally a week left, and it makes me a bit nervous, honestly. How is your Shahr Ramadan going? Let me know. Let us know in the comments. But Abdullah is saying Alhamdulillah very well. Everything is going very well. Awesome. Alhamdulillah. I'm glad it's going well. Inshallah. How about the rest of you? How's Ramadan going? Are you, have you finished your A'mal? Are they still going? Some places they keep going, which is great, until the end, which is actually very important. Brother Zunair says, Alhamdulillah, better with your presence. Zunair, we are better because of you. Alhamdulillah. Sis Fatima says it's so sad it's coming to an end. I know it's sad it's coming to an end. Sad is the wrong word. It's more than sad. It's tragic, and it is going fast, as Sister Sana says. It's very difficult. I see Agha Mehdi has joined. So if you request to join live, Sheikh, and then we'll add you on, inshallah. But yeah, Ramadan, it does feel like it's leaving quickly. No, it's not the last episode today. Don't worry. Today's not the last episode. Unless Sheikh Mehdi does something which ends the podcast, which... But no, today's not the last episode. I'm just saying it's sad that we are coming to an end. I'm simply making a poignant remark. Assalamu alaikum, Agha.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. You can hear and see me okay, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh,
can you hear me well?
Yeah, super well. How are you? So good to see you.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you. You too.
This has been a long time coming, long time coming.
I can definitely attest to that. That's true.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Now I'm so excited to have you on. Obviously, everyone, and anyone who's listening who was a guest, who's going to be a guest, this is not in any way about you, but I'm so excited to have Sheikh Mahdi on, so I'm glad that it worked out.
Thank you.
What part of why it was so fun is because of time zones. I still don't know where you are or what the time zone is. Like, could you explain it to me?
Sure. Well, I can explain where we are. I don't think I can explain the time zones. I mean, we're in we're in Dallas. We're based in Dallas. That's U.S. Central Time.
Okay.
I think you guys are 6 hours ahead of us. I think that's what it is.
Hang on. So right now it's 11 o'clock for me. So what is it?
Yeah, it's like 5.
5.
Here.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not that hard. That was never an impediment to our...
I mean, I told you were having trouble, figuring out the times. And I don't know if anyone has a website, by the way, that just converts the times. It's like a really simple thing. I'm sure it's something out there. But if anyone can put it in the comments or something, that would be amazing. Because like every time I have this issue, and the only way I can figure out like what this time is going to be versus this time, I have to go and look at the clock in that area and then do the conversion myself. And I'm like, there must be like a million websites.
No, I literally Google
I
Google it. I'm like London to New York time difference, and it just tells me.
But that'll tell you the time difference, right? So then every time, like if you want to foretell when you're going to do something, you have to go and do all the calculations, right? And you're like, sometimes you'll get it wrong, right? Like you'll think you get it right, and then like when the time comes, you'll get it wrong. So that's why I'm always like, I wish there's just a website. I just go to it. They tell me what to do, and widgets on Android. Unfortunately, I'm
imagine 30 podcasts, half of them American. Like me trying to get everyone to come on time has been its own journey. Honestly.
Yeah, I'm sure it's been difficult for you.
No, it's been blessed. The only hard thing is, like, for example, with the vibe of the podcast is we've had iftar, we're chilling, okay? You've neither had iftar
I don't know if you're chilling,
Yeah.
but like you're not in that zone of mind yet, you know? So that's the only
It's fine for me.
really?
Yeah, I'm good.
We have dessert next door and I didn't bring it out of respect to you.
No,
Is it really
I'm
fine
fine.
or
I don't want to deal with the pain of hellfire. I'm
oh,
fine.
shots fired from 6 hours ago.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good, inshallah.
I heard, maybe you can confirm that. Do you think that my podcast is the best of all the Shia podcasts? Is that true? Even better than yours? Did you really say this?
I don't even know what's out there, to be honest. I haven't had a chance to take a look, so I have no idea. It could be. I don't know.
How's your current series been, and have you finished your lecturing and all, or you still got a few more to go for the month of Ramadan?
No, so what we do here is kind of a little a new approach that we took. Although I'm pretty sure some other places they do this, but I know here in the US, around the world, I think people usually do Ramadan 15 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll have one speaker for 15 days, and then another speaker for 15 days. And what we did was with City of Knowledge, which is the center that we kind of founded, was that we started doing things a little bit different based on the feedback we were getting from the community. Mm-hmm. So what we do is we do the whole month, but we only do Thursday through Sunday of every week, plus the nights of Qadr, of course, right? And so what we've realized is that when you go through Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, by Monday, everyone kind of needs a resting time. Everyone needs some time to go to iftar at their relative's house, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes people even need time to catch up on the lectures, recordings, right? So that's kind of what we do. There's pros to it, there's cons to it. The pro to it is that you have these breaks in the middle. For our community, it's proven to be really, really nice. Mm-hmm. For the con to it is that, well, you have one speaker for the whole month, right? And so
how is that a con when it's you?
Thank you. No, I mean, it's just it's really not that big of a con, because I think like this Ramadan, I'm ending up doing 19, right? Normally you would have done 15, now you're doing 19. It's not really a big difference. So no, alhamdulillah, it works well for us.
Alhamdulillah. No, that's interesting that you took feedback and took it on board as well. Because the month of Ramadan should be usable and practical. And we have to tweak a lot of things. So I'm glad that you're leading the way. There's other things we have to tweak as well, but I'm glad that this is one of them. Do they get tired after Monday as well? Do they just get tired of coming to the mosque, or are they eager to get going the next day?
You mean on Monday after we've had the multiple programs? I mean, it's just obligations, work, life. I mean, the important thing is Ramadan is a time for you and I to take it in, right? To have time for our worship, have time for reflection, even have time for family, right? That's a really important thing. And the way our programs are normally set up in our masajid, it doesn't allow for that, And if the expectation is that you're going to feel guilty because you didn't go to the masjid every single night, that's going to affect a lot of the other things that you're essentially doing, So that's kind of the thought process behind it.
Well, alhamdulillah, and I'm hoping the best for all the programs, and to your respected brother as well.
Thank you.
I'm trying to get him on for a podcast longer than you.
That'll take probably a decade or so.
No, but I know how to do it. It will just be partly illegal and partly immoral. But I know exactly how to do it.
Yes. You can get him that way.
Those two. Yeah, exactly. But shout out to Sheikh. I mean, inshallah, hopefully he's well, and send my salams to him when you see him. Inshallah.
He's doing well, alhamdulillah.
For those of you who have joined the podcast, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining. Inshallah, all of you guys are well wherever you are, and please do pray for us in these nights and follow the podcast, inshallah. And obviously, Sheikh Mahdi's lectures where he is. All right. So here's the thing. Early in the month when I had you confirmed, I was asking some friends of mine, listen, I've got Sheikh Mahdi. Awesome news. What should we talk about? Okay. And people kept saying to me that your personal journey in studying Islam and the way that you've used it when you've got back is quite distinct. And I was like, well, it's true. It does seem like a particularly unique story. But I would love to know what lessons we can take from different ways of gaining ilm and different ways of communicating Islam to people in the West. So let me begin like this. Obviously, you are from the seminarian background, the Hausa background. Ilm from the Hausa is not the only way to study Islam, but it does seem to have certain special value to the community. what do you think is the unique or responsibility of ilm from the Hausa in the West or in the communities in the West that we have?
Yeah, so yeah, that's like you said, that's my background. And so when people ask me about the differences between studying in the Hausa versus maybe doing Islamic studies in like a university, all that kind of stuff, I usually don't have much of a response for them because I haven't experienced the other side. So I've only experienced the the Hausawi side of it, and Alhamdulillah, it was a very very good experience. It gave me most of what I was looking for, not all of it. Uh, there's always things that you have to go back and work on yourself, knowledge wise. But I think for the most part, it gave me what I was looking for. Um, the reality is that the system of the Hausa is a proven system. It's a system that's been there for thousands of years. It's not a path you're taking and you're like, okay, well, does it have a role to play or does it not have a role to play? No, it'll always have a role to play. Just like we say, there's so many different ways of speaking to people nowadays, right? We're on Instagram Live right now. You could be on Twitter. You could be on whatever, right? But the minbar will always have its role. It's a proven role. It'll always be there in one shape or form or another. So yeah, I think in our communities, the role of someone who goes through Hausa studies can be a really big role. As long as he can take that information, he can take those teachings and present them in a way that are relevant to the lives of the audience that he's speaking to. And I think that's the area where it becomes quite tricky and it becomes quite difficult, because that's not an easy thing to do. It's one thing to just take a book and say, okay, this is what this book says about Islamic history, right? Like when I was going through the research for the talks, there's different books you go through, and these different books, they're all looking at it from their own angle. They're addressing issues that they think are really important, right? But not every one of those issues are actually important to your community, your audience. It's not necessarily stuff they deal with, right? And so you have to be able to take that and then say, okay, in this context, what is it that my audience is really in need of? What will they connect with, right? And then try to present it that way. I think if that's done well, the Hausawi experience has a huge role to play, but it has to be done well. If it's not done well, then it'll come off as this outdated sort of approach, if that makes sense, and then it's not able to play its role anymore.
Yeah, or it seems, preachy or archaic, or even the language is inaccessible. And as a result, if the only person who reminds you of the deen is someone wearing the garb of a person of deen, if that's inaccessible, the religion itself becomes a distant thing, because that person is the ambassador of it, which raises questions of how we represent Islam in the best way. Something I've noticed about Hausa is that it's not just about ilm in a intellectual way. You have to experience and be an ambassador for Ahl al-Bayt and for the path. Have you found that people are expecting you to behave in a certain way as much as they're expecting you to answer questions in a certain way?
People expect it. I don't know to what extent I've been able to fulfill that, but yeah, definitely people expect it. I would say this, people's expectations, you'll be surprised how far it goes when you're able to fulfill that role to whatever extent, right? I mean, I have a million shortcomings, right? But I try my best, right? And what I've seen with even other scholars is that if you're able to do some simple things, and I think the most important of all of them is good akhlaq and being able to connect with people. If you carry that, it's quite interesting how far that goes, right? I remember when we were getting City of Knowledge off the ground. It's a very young organization. It's only 3 years old. When we were getting it off the ground, we were still doing programs in people's homes and different places and so on and so forth. And this young man came, he's a young boy, not a young man. I think he was like 13 at that time, right? And he mentioned his name, and I shook hands with him and his dad. And then fast forward 3 months later, I saw him again, and I said his name, right? And I didn't even take it that seriously. I was just like, well, you'd remember people's names. Then later on, I remember the father came back and he was just like, oh my God, like a scholar remembered my son's name. And I was
It's
like, isn't
mad.
that what's supposed to happen? So people expect it. To what extent are we able to fulfill it is a separate discussion. But if you make a proper attempt, I think it goes a really long way.
It goes both ways though. Sometimes your brother once remembered me when we first met
Mm.
to reprimand me for something, and it's like, oh damn, like
You were in trouble.
yeah, it was like did you do that thing? And I was like, no. It's like, dude, I
Yeah, there
told you
you
to.
go.
So yeah, so it goes both ways.
Yep.
um, it's interesting, people are not a sea of faces in a crowd. They are people, and they have their own journey, and they build a connection to an alim based on what they need for themselves as well. People go through difficulties in life, and they often seek a spiritual teacher or a guide, and quite often that becomes the resident alim or a visiting scholar or someone who they have access to. I think increasingly it's online now. If someone has a presence online, you must get loads of messages of people sharing their stories. Something I found is in the early years of Tabligh that I found, it's actually an honor for people to include you in their lives. And the fact that
Definitely.
in their journey to God, they are coming to you to take something or be some part of that experience. It is such an honor that people would open up to you and say, I'm going through this issue, and I really think that point you made in the lecture, I connect with it. It's helping me towards God. It is an outrageous and unbelievable level of khidmah that, someone talks to God about you. You must have found that early on and now that this is a very special position to be in when someone is on their journey with you.
Yeah, it's definitely very humbling, right? Because when you start Hausa studies, you don't start it with these intentions. You just start it with, for me personally, the reason why Hausa was such an important part of my life was because growing up, I used to have discussions with my parents, in particular my father, about different, parts of our belief system and all that kind of stuff. And then when he wasn't able to answer the question in the most thorough way, because obviously he's not an alim. A lot of people think my father's an alim because all three brothers went to Hausa, right? But he has nothing to do with the Hausa actually. When he would struggle a little bit, then I was like, oh, there's more to this that I have to learn, because he can't provide all the answers. He did an amazing job, of course, but I mean, he's not an expert in this field. So that's why I went. Like, I went because there were questions that I had that I wanted answers to myself, right? And that's why it never bothers me when people come to me like, well, Sheikh, I have these doubts, I have these questions. And I'm like, great. So we're like each other. We have a lot in
Yeah.
common then, because this is why I started this journey, right? And I wish when I was their age, I had someone who could explain, the answer to a lot of these questions to me, And,
Yeah.
20 years ago, the situation with our communities and English speakers and people who could relate to you, extremely different from what we're dealing with today. I mean, unbelievably different. So anyways, that's why, I went. But now you come and people are like, what you said here was very helpful. When you said there is very helpful. I mean, it's one of those things that gives you, for me personally, it gives me a lot of energy, right? And it reminds you why you do what you do, which can get lost a lot of times because you're so busy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But when someone comes to you and says, well, this talk that you did, this point of it was very special, and it helped me, for example, with this, right? Then it helps so much. It helps so much. And I hope, people do more of it, for all scholars who speak, because you'll be surprised how sometimes scholars will sit back and say, well, what I'm doing, is it really resonating, with the crowd, or is it really helpful or not, and so on and so forth. I will say this though, sometimes, and this is really funny, sometimes people will come up to me after a lecture and they'll be like, they'll be so kind and they'll praise like the lecture, like amazing content, Sheikh. The point you made about like Imam Ali doing this was so powerful. And then when I think about my notes, I'm like, I never made this point. like, I was talking about something else altogether. Like the lecture wasn't even about Imam Ali, right? And this guy's like, this point. But you know what? Either way, I'll take it. Either way, whatever it was, this person is tying that wonderful experience to this talk. I'll take it as long as you are playing that role. Then you'll take it either way.
And also like that also demonstrates you never know what point will get who in life. You never know like what they need to hear at a certain time, not just from the minbar. On Twitter, on Instagram, it might be a saying or an ayah of Quran that, you know, I actually needed that tiny reminder, and out of nowhere someone retweeted something from somewhere, and now I remember that Allah is forgiving and merciful. Like, it's weird how these things happen, and maybe it's maslahah, but for this person who's receiving it, it seems random. You know how that works. This reminds me of another thing which we've spoken about before, which is, you know, when you are discussing with people about ilm of Ahl al-Bayt and the Quran and all these things, you're trying to make it relevant to their lives. You're trying to make a religion which was revealed 1400 years ago, and members of the religion who lived that year ago, and books published by those whose bones have decayed now, relevant to someone's life right now. And what we keep finding is it is relevant, and the Quran keeps becoming fresh to people. And we discussed Nahj Balagha. Remember, I mentioned to you, like, there's certain sayings of Nahj Balagha, which when I was studying, I was like, I can't believe what this means for me and for us right now. And this was written such a long time ago. Have you found Ahl al-Bayt speak in a way which is accessible, and especially for our community in the West? Like, do we have like a special relationship to Ahl al-Bayt in the Quran because of this world that we live in?
Well, are they relatable? Definitely. Again, what it takes is for you to take those experiences of Ahl al-Bayt and then explain them in a way that is relatable. Again, that's not an easy thing to do, you know, like when you prepare a lecture, a big part of it for me personally is, okay, this is the content, I'm going to mention this point and then this point and then this point. This is how the transition is going to work.
This part's for Instagram. This is the sound bite.
No.
This is the promo. Let me post the camera. This is the thumbnail.
Okay, I do the lecture for the lecture.
I know, I'm kidding.
So then, like, okay, this is the point I'm going to cover. But then a big part of it, right, is that, okay, now all of this, for me personally, this is the story that the Imam went through. It's odd when I say this, but for me personally, it's already relatable. Like I'm already like hooked, right? Because like I'm like, oh, Imam Sadiq had a friend who was like this. He said something, and then the Imam got upset at him. Done. That's an amazing story. For the average audience, you know, they like that. They're also looking for, okay, what does that mean for me now, right? So then there's this added layer to preparing the lecture where you sit back and say, okay, what's that hook and what's that lesson that we take from this, right? So I'll give you an example that a dear friend of mine just the 2 nights ago on the 23rd, we were doing, you know, the Battle of Ahzab, right? And so I went through, you know, the whole thing and, you know, the whole fight of Ali ibn Abi Talib and Amr ibn Abdewud and that whole thing, right?
The Nara Haydari section, yeah?
The Nara Haydari section, exactly. And this guy who told me this was the one who gave the Nara Haydari, actually, right?
Perfect.
So then, you know, the funny thing was one time we were talking about a topic and I started talking about how, you know, women play such a big role, and then all of a sudden one of the women gave Nara Haydari. So
oh, wow. That's the
that's
next level.
Yeah, that's next level. But anyway, so we went through this. And obviously I was trying to go through all the details of, you know, his warrior, you know, how much of a warrior he was and all that. Yeah. And then, but by the end, the last 2 minutes, I was like, okay, listen, we talked about his swordsmanship and we talked about this and that, but all of this only makes sense within the context of what he's doing. And I said, well, the lesson here is not that Ali ibn Abi Talib was just brave or he was a warrior. In reality, Ahzab, the Battle of Ahzab, the lesson to take away from it is that he was a vessel for God's work to happen on earth. So whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted something to happen on earth, he is the one who would implement that. And so the lesson for you and I is to figure out what is God's work on earth today, and let's be the vessel to that. And that's how you walk in his footsteps, right? So, but this transition that you make, that's the part that needs work, right? And say, okay, this is the story, but how do I take this and make it relevant enough that when this person walks out of his home today, either he has some belief that he can remind himself of, or he has some actionable item, you know, that he can implement. So that, I think if we do more of that,
on the car journey home, that's what comes up. That's what's like, what did you learn today? I learned that when we do this situation, we actually said because of that story or that verse.
Yes.
That's what goes home. Yeah, that is true. That is very true. It's also telling a story and telling a narrative as well. And I think we have so many stories to tell. We are rich. We are so wealthy when it comes to the tradition that we have.
Yeah,
Definitely. When you're obviously as you're also researching as well as lecturing, so you are learning, yourself and you are on your
yeah.
journey. How often does it happen that you read something and you think, Ali ibn Talib said what? Or like this verse in the Quran as well? Like, do you even find yourself being surprised by the literature?
Yes. I mean, I can't count the number of times, right? So first of all, just like you said, every time I prepare something or anything like that, it's something that I personally learn from, right?
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, well, for me, it's people always ask me, so like, okay, you studied in house and everything. Do you continue your studies? And I'm like, trust me, the lectures that I prepare is part of my studies because
Absolutely.
there's so much history to be studied. There's so much tafsir to be studied, and these are areas that almost never end. And so when you put together a presentation, like if it's a Mizan online presentation or it's a lecture for the center, whatever the case might be, there's so much that you walk away with. And in fact, what you read, maybe 40-50% of it never makes it into the lecture because you
Yeah.
don't have time for to put that in the lecture, and you have to be selective with what goes in there. So there's so much you walk away with. But yes, there's definitely times where you read something and you're like, wow, this is something that our Imam said. This is something that our Prophet did. So the speaker and the scholar, whatever we want to call him, he has that experience. And then he has to take that and see which of those moments of surprise is appropriate for the audience
Naturally.
and
Yeah.
provide them with some of those moments of surprise as well, right?
Mm.
Not everything that's like astonishing to us is what we should be talking about in the lecture because
Yeah.
it needs context and it needs explanation and all that kind of stuff.
True.
Every now and then, you do have to throw in some of those because let me just say this, right? Our understanding, and I'm talking about the Shia school of thought in particular,
Mm.
right? Our school of thought, our understanding of how the Prophet did things, how the Imams did things, is there's a huge distance. Like, let me put it this way: we have so much learning to do, so much learning to do. We think we've grown up in these communities where we grew up with Ya Ali and the love of Hussein and all this kind of stuff, and we did. But the love of these individuals and the knowledge of who they were and how they did things, two very different things.
Yeah.
And we are very, Abbas, this is one thing you need to know about me. I don't exaggerate. Okay. When
I know.
people come to me, they're like, there was
I
like
know
1,000.
already. I know already. Don't worry.
Yeah, yeah, I don't exaggerate, okay? But when I say this, I really mean it. We are
Yeah.
way
I know.
behind,
I know.
And so there's times where you have to take it and say, okay, this is what our community needs to learn about the
Yeah.
Imam that they've been mourning for hundreds of years, but they didn't know the same Imam did this, for example, or the same Imam did that. And then that allows you to have like a deeper understanding of their lives. This is Ahl Bayt. Yeah, I mean, let's not even get started on Quran.
Yeah.
Quran is like, that one just kind of pains me because we have very much whatever work we have to do to learn about the lives of the Imams, like double that or triple that when it comes to the Quran itself, and that's something that I hope we can spend more time on and do more work on.
Inshallah. Two things I was thinking of when you were speaking. Well, many things, but two things that
Mm.
I'll mention to the crowd because of what you just said. Yesterday we had Sid Hadi on the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
and he mentioned this point about the needs of the community are separate to the needs of the researcher.
Mm-hmm.
And what often happens is the individual, some people who have gained knowledge will be wanting to share it with the community or with other people, but they'll not understand how certain ideas were already embedded in the collective. And when they bring up the idea, it can be a threat to more than just the idea they're conquering. It can be a threat to many things. And there's a lot of responsibility in introducing, new ideas. So this point you mentioned is a very beautiful point, I think. That we have to be careful of what part of the story to bring, and it's not the whole thing, because not only
Yeah.
people might not understand, it might be a cause for more bad than good in the immediate term.
Yeah.
And we should be careful what we're losing. There's a comment here about Thaqlain is Quran Ahl Bayt. The Shia school seems to be connected to Ahl Bayt, but kind of disregard the Quran. Yeah, and we pray that Sheikh Mahdi and others can, and inshallah, all of
And
us
let
can
me just
counter
clarify.
that.
Our school of thought is, when we say our school of thought, this school of thought is a very broad terminology that we're using. So we have to just be a tad bit careful. And that is that, like, when you look at our great scholars, their connection with the Quran is very, very deep, right? When you look at our imams, their connection with the Quran was like unbelievable, right? When they spoke, they're just like quoting Quran left and right, right? So that when we say our school of thought, what I mean is like us who claim to be followers of the school of thought, we have kind of neglected it. Otherwise, a school of thought, the foundations of it are in fact based on verses of the Quran in a far deeper way than I think other schools of thought have taken a look at the verses of the Quran,
Very
right?
true.
So the understanding and the interpretation of the verses of the Quran within the Shia school of thought is a lot of times like much more profound, I would say, and a much more deeper look at things. But yeah, us as followers, yeah, definitely, we've definitely disregarded Quran.
It's quite evident in the literature, I think. When you go to the classical text and even the foundational text, Quran is mixed with every idea which is discussed in the speeches of the Prophet, in the hadith, the Imams. It is almost like an interplay between the Quran and Shahr, and then back to Quran again. It's a beautiful dialogue. And yeah, there's a lot of comments coming in. But they're saying maybe we as individuals don't take responsibility seriously of learning Quran and Ahlul Bayt. Yeah, that's what I'm going to come to in a second. But Abdullah saying absolutely, Allama, Tabatabai and others have done amazing works of Quran. Absolutely. Ali Imran says Akhbaris KO'd us. Yes, say it, they did. But inshallah, we're not fully KO'd. We're coming back in the next round, inshallah. We've neglected the Quran and the Hadith, unfortunately. Very true. Here's the other thing I want to mention to you, and I actually gave you a shout out recently in a community. There's a Q&A, and somebody asked me, is the minbar enough for ilm? And I mentioned that a similar point you mentioned, which is when you research a lecture, maybe 8 or 9 hours of worth of content, which doesn't actually make the final lecture, which are equally as valid for that topic, but they don't make the actual narrative. And relying just on a lecture or lecture series does not get to the heart of the matter in the way that you would if you had researched it yourself. But something which is almost bridging that gap are educational courses and workshops, which almost serve that function of giving the listener direct access to the core texts and commentary and scholars. And I know that yourself and the Mizan Institute and other groups that you're involved with have taken a leadership role on this. Let me ask you, from lecturing to delivering actual courses and structured education, how different is the output of the understanding of those who go through it? Is this the way forward, or is this just part of the way forward, do you think?
The workshops, you mean, or the lecturing?
Yeah,
is like a
the workshops and the structured education, like that whole side of things, it's more educational in its form.
Yeah. A really good question. So, personally, I'm kind of involved on both sides, and I always wanted it to be that way. I mean, each of these play their own role, right? And this idea that, well, we have to now only have workshops. I've had people approach me like that too. Oh, we should just have, instead of Muharram lectures, we should just have like a bunch of workshops. No, the minbar has its own role. It will always have its own role. It's too proven over history. It has too long of a heritage, to just, wipe it out like that. So it'll always have its own role. But then, yeah, I mean, workshops and places of, more structured learning, that's something that is heavily, again, missing in our communities. It's heavily missing in our communities. And usually people will take on that role who don't necessarily come from a Hawzawi background, right? They'll come from other backgrounds, which is, of course, has its own validity and all that kind of stuff. But I'm just speaking from my own experience. It's important for those who have Hawzawi background to, play that role and to disseminate information and knowledge in that particular way. What I will say is that when we do those, like, for example, when we do we do weekend workshops, right? We had some trips scheduled for, I think it was, I don't know if it was UK or some other place in Europe. This is right before COVID.
My UK, my end, you coming over?
Not now, no. I was like, this was before COVID. And then COVID happened and all got canceled, right? But like that stuff is, when we do it, you can see that the community's understanding of that topic goes from here to here.
Wow.
And it's really, really special because the places we visited, they always, for the most part, they always come back to like, when's the next one? When are we going to have the next one? Can you guys have one on this topic? Can you have one on that topic, right?
Yeah.
And this area is such an area that has such a severe need. I can't underestimate how much of a need there is in this. The obstacle that's there is a lot of our communities are struggling a little bit to make this transition, even though it's way past time. It's like way back. We should have made this transition like 10, 15 years ago.
But they're not structurally like built for that either.
They're not. So like they're like, a lot of people, times people reach out to me. They're like, well, Sheikh, can we please have you over? And I'm like, okay, well, can we do like a course? Can we do a weekend course? Like, oh, like we just wanted a lecture. And I'm like, I would love, to do the lecture, but can we also have like the course, for example? And some communities, it's just like such a new thing. Like we've never tried this before. And so they'll struggle, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit of time that's taking and all that kind of stuff. But the need that's there is so humongous that, and I always say this, I say in this arena, our Sunni brothers and sisters have been way ahead of us, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, they have institutions that have been established for many years, like institutions with 50 instructors all of a sudden. Sometimes I see a flyer, there's like 50 instructors on it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, just the fact that you have that capability to have that many people available, at your disposal, and you can like.
I mean, we only
had
30 for this series. They had 50. I'm like, it's a whole.
Well, listen, your 30, I think, also broke a record. I don't think I've seen 30 on one
Really?
flyer. I haven't seen a 30 on one flyer for a long time.
Agha, if Ramadan was longer, I'd have more.
I know, with your method of like keep asking year after year. I mean, I'm sure you would get more. But yeah, these workshops and everything, I think it has a very bright future, because our, I don't even want to say our younger generation. People think this is just for the youth. No. Even we've had adults who are like, I wish I had this sooner, and I wish I had this capability, at an earlier time.
But it's also because of the way it's not made for children. It's made for people who want to learn. That's the point. Similar with the house that we have here in the UK, and these are courses designed for having a meaningful relationship with knowledge. And this comes into the first point you mentioned, which was unfortunately what we see is people delivering these education courses who don't have a relationship to the ilm themselves, which is an issue. If it is, for example, an academic or somebody who's not practicing it, with Islamic information and knowledge, there's a thing where it's like you need to embody or be an example of the point. I mean, I'm
at least try to.
Yeah, exactly. And I show that the ilm has some amal attached to it, basically. But if it's completely secular, which is part of, I guess, how modern education works, I cannot have a emotional or real connection to the knowledge. I just can't. Yeah. So if someone's talking to me about barzakh and death, and I know they're an atheist, honestly, I'm only processing this in the way that I process a documentary on television about something from someone that I have no relation to. That's why I like that with this, you guys, you meet and you chill and you relax and you spend quality time with the people as well. Have you found value in that kind of walaya alongside the education as well? Or is that like a different thing for you where we need to be accessible?
Well, I wouldn't call it walaya to begin with. So what you mean, that relationship is what you're referring to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wilaya is a very heavy word. I would, that's something for our imams and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, the idea is that obviously when you're dealing with community, you're not dealing with objects. You're not just dealing with brains, right? You're dealing with a person full of emotions, full of experiences, all of this kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely there is a huge element of just connecting with people, and it's not, it comes at a little bit of a price, because at the end of the day, it's time you have to put in, but it's an investment, right? It's time you invest, because then you have a relationship with this person and you have a connection with this person. So definitely, I mean, I don't know, to put this into perspective, nowadays we're used to lectures and all that kind of stuff. During the time of the imams, how much did they really lecture anyways? How much did they, like, right? And they really didn't, in that sense of the word.
It was
They
Socratic.
had
It was walking and showing lessons and examples and
It was
real
lessons and examples. It
yeah,
was, gatherings where they used to sit with their students, right? And they used
yeah,
to be like, okay, this is what I heard from, I mean, these are the scholars more so than the imams. Like, this is what I heard. So they used to do imla to them and, all that kind of stuff. But the lecturing format is something that is developed, in the later years of
yeah.
our history. My point is that idea of spending time and all of that stuff is amazing. It's an investment, and I wish we could have more of it, honestly.
Inshallah. Can I go through some questions and comments from the people listening?
Sure.
Inshallah, there have been loads of amazing feedback. Sheikh Mahdi, how do you recommend we in the West start our journey to have a deeper connection with the Quran and to learn it? It's Shahr Ramadan. It's a great time to ask the question. What steps can we make now, do you think?
I mean, there's religious educational tools that are available to us. I mean, I can speak on behalf of Mizan Institute. Sheikh Amin's done like this lesson per page thing, right?
Yeah.
And the whole idea behind it was, okay, take the Quran, out of each page, take one verse, right, and then discuss that verse, right? And this is just one of the many efforts that's being done. So these are the tools that we have available to us, and I think that unfortunately in our communities there's still a perspective of, well, I want something emotional and I want something like, powerful and this and that, and that's wonderful when you can get it, but your seeking of knowledge should go beyond just what is powerful and what is emotional and all that kind of stuff. You have to seek the meaning of the Quran itself and all of that kind of stuff. So that's one. And then number two is just reading books, which is something we don't do at all. Number three is podcasts. Personally, I don't really get much time to sit and read books nowadays. So I listen to most of them, actually, right? So that's a huge thing to do. And a podcast, I mean, I don't know if it gets easier than a podcast. A podcast, I jokingly say, for a podcast, you just have to breathe. That's all you have to do. You don't have to do anything else. You could be driving, or you could be running, or you could be doing whatever, and the role of audio is just going to get bigger and bigger in our lives as time passes. So these are some of the tools, I think these can be helpful.
Speaking of podcasts, any particular podcasts you want to give a shout out to those who are listening right now? I don't know, any podcast of your choice?
It's going to sound bad, and the reason why is I say this honestly because I haven't seen, the podcasts that we have there. We have a lot of podcasts, alhamdulillah, in the Shi realm. We have a lot of podcasts. So I think so. I don't know. That's what I'm saying.
We have a lot, but I don't know which one could we give a shout out to today. I don't know which one.
No, I'll speak of Mizan Institutes. Don't worry. Like you can just Google Mizan Institute podcast or go to the website and check out the podcast and everything. I think there's like 10, if I'm not mistaken, by now.
There are a few very, very good ones. Yeah.
Myself and Sheikh Amin and Sayyid Ali Imran, and I think. If I'm not leaving out, anybody else, hopefully I'm not leaving out anybody else. So yeah, you can definitely check those out. But I was talking about even outside of that, even outside of Mizan Institute. I'm sure that there are good podcasts outside of that as well. I'm just not aware of them. To be
I was giving you the perfect way to give a shout out to my podcast. And
well, no, the role that your podcast plays is a little different, right? So yes, Sheikh Zuhair Ismail's is a wonderful one.
Sheikh Fayaz Ja'far as well is actually very good as well.
Sheikh Fayaz Ja'far. The role that your podcast has is a little bit different. It's more about, connecting scholars and so on and so forth. What I was referring to was like purely
educational.
Yeah, purely educational. That's what I was referring to. Well, otherwise, definitely.
Alhamdulillah.
I mean, the folks who are already here, you're going to give them a shout out about your podcast. They're already here.
That's true. We're preaching literally to the converted. At least follow, guys. Just Fatima saying, I love the Iqra initiative as it provided a window to opportunity to access the deeper understanding from different experts. Yeah. Getting different voices.
Iqra online?
I think that's Ali Imran's one for, but I think
yes,
it's called
definitely.
Yeah, I think. Ali Imran's on the podcast very soon, guys. So prepare yourself and I guess bring popcorn. and bring a plaster for that vision of Islam to heal after that. After that discussion, inshallah. When there are some workshops, not everyone can afford the costs. Interesting point. I mean, there's two sides to it. One side is when you value something, you pay for it, and we pay for all sorts of things in our society and have no issue with it. And ilm is not the creation of this content is not free. There are costs, there's time, and there's loads of things. On the other hand, that doesn't mean there should be no free content at all. It just means that it should be there. Sheikh, how do we make sure we're not pricing people out of this? Are there measures we should be taking to be accessible?
Normally what we do is that there's a pricing for it, and if someone isn't able to take care of it, usually there's a code or something like that they're able to put in and just have access to the online presentation for free. The stuff that we do in person, usually it's covered by the center or the organization that we're going to. So then usually individuals don't really have to pitch in much. I will say though that, for 90% of our community members in this part of the world, I mean, it shouldn't really be a problem anyways, right? Free sabilillah. Yeah, exactly. So it shouldn't really be a problem, but for like, I think 5-10%, it might be. And so there has to be some mechanism, at the end of the day. So yeah, I don't think that should be too much of a problem.
I'll go with you more quickly. Mizan History, Balancing the Scales. Some brother really recommends the stages of akhlaq in the Quran podcast. That's a particularly exceptional one.
Yeah.
Shia Imamiyya podcast by Sheikh Amin on Mizan. That's actually a very important one for our Aqidah. So that's a good one.
Yeah.
Abdullah was helping me out for which one he was asking for the shout out. As was Sister Fatima. Brother Zunair, our dear Brother Zunair, what has been your favorite memory from the Hawza? Interesting question.
Is that our Zunair? Is that Dallas Zunair?
That's our Zunair,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the best memory from the Hawza. I mean, I think I've shared this before. It was kind of the relationship. So when I started, I was 16, right? So I started straight out of high school. And the pro of that is that you're not distracted at all. Like, so you go into the house and this is your whole life, right? Like you're not at that point, you're not married, you're not none of that stuff. So, I think that the best memory that I personally had is how much we used to look up to our teachers and the type of, it's kind of difficult to put into perspective, like the way you used to look at them and the way that, so let me just say this. Like one time I remember we had a visiting scholar. He's a very well-known scholar. I just don't want to mention his name right now, but he was visiting our school. And I remember I used to think to myself, like when he used to sit and there were students around him and all that kind of stuff. And he used to explain, and just the way he used to look at people, you would feel that love and that relationship and like the care he has for these students. I used to think to myself, and I was like, if this is just a normal teacher, right? This is just an alim, right? Who's teaching and all that kind of stuff. This is an alim who used to teach usul kafi, used to teach hadith. I used to think to myself, it's like, if it's so important for me that this scholar just looks at me and is happy with me and smiles at me, right? And that would like, make your day or make your year really in reality. I was like, what would it feel like if this person was the imam or, someone like that, and then they looked at you and they smiled at you and you're like, your mind would be blown, right? You'd be like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. So that relationship, I think, is one of the most important things that I took away from the house.
That's beautiful. And actually, every Musa has their khidr, so everyone listening should be able to seek good teachers for themselves, inshallah. Maybe not in the same way as that, but people you can latch onto and hold with both arms as they give you ilm, definitely. There are two separate questions here on the same theme of parents thinking about ilm for their children. One is a private question, which is from a mother. She says she's a full-time mother with a full-time job. Sometimes I struggle with teaching my children about Islam. The nearest Imam Bagha is 2 hours away. What should I focus on? My oldest is 10 years old. Similar to that, we have this point from Abdullah, which is I'm a married father of 3 with a full-time hospital job and I'm still in school. I want to do myself how to study since it's available in English online. How do I do that? What's available? So one question is saying, as a parent, should I be studying Hawza and giving that to my children? The other is saying, what should I focus on for giving my children education when I'm in that, you know, full-time work?
I mean, I really don't know if you see however we're going to invest in our children, it's going to take time, right? And if it's going to take time, then you have to figure out some form of way to open up more time. The only and I don't think it's available to this sister who's asking this question. The only way where I've seen you can take advantage of a situation where you're not necessarily investing time, but your child is being taught these things like day in and day out, is if you have a good Islamic school near you. That's a game changer, by the way. If you have a good Islamic school, like I tell parents that is the single greatest step you can take to instilling Islamic concepts in your child. But it has to be a good school, number one. And number two, it doesn't take care of everything. Everyone is always at threat. Everyone is always, shaitan is always there, all that kind of stuff, So, but other than that, it's the single step that you can take where it has the greatest, return on investment, so to speak, right? Yeah. But outside of that, then you have to kind of sit and try to see what other time you can have with the kids of, reading, Islamic books to them. I mean, nowadays we have Islamic cartoons, all that kind of stuff. There is, that kind of stuff. What we're maybe might want to attempt get going with Mizan Institute is some of these courses that we're offering for elders, not elders, but like a young brother or sister and above, right? Like a 16, 17-year-old and above. We are planning maybe to get some of them going for like teens with a version that is a little bit more relatable to them, a little bit more easier for them to understand in a better packaged way. That is something that we are working on. Like, for example, the Secrets of Salat course that we've done in a number of cities here. That's a serious one that we might want to do like a teen version on, where it doesn't go into all the deeper irfani stuff, but it goes into it gives children a better understanding of what this salat is about and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, that's for the future, and we'll see what we can do with that. For the other brother who was asking about the Hausa thing, I know that there's some online options, but I'm really not the best to ask about this, to be honest. I really don't know. So yeah, I don't think I can help with that one.
There are not a lot, but there are an increasing number of online houses. Brother can reach out to me directly, and I'll message him some of the ones that are out there, and he can, inshallah, choose what's best for him in this situation. Because we're getting feedback for that point you mentioned. People are saying, well, we have children, we're so happy that's happening. So, inshallah, something interactive can be created. Sheikh, I know we have to finish soon. I'd kind of put an hour aside for this, and I know people are still asking questions. Let me kind of ask another one, which kind of summarizes some of the ideas that we've been discussing. Is there a project or an end goal with the work we are doing? So much of our work is retrospective. This wasn't done when I was a child. This when I was younger, and we're kind of catching up to where we should be. But do we have in mind an ideal community or method that we are chasing or working towards? And by the way, are we too busy problem solving that we lose sight of that? Or is this like an active thing we should all be thinking of, or we're working towards the same thing?
Do we have like a solid, mature, well thought out plan of what exactly does that future look like? I would say no, not to that extent, right? But do we have I think there's a lot of things to be taken care of that are so fundamental and are missing, that right now, those are the things we have to get off the ground, right? And like Secrets of Salat, for example, right? Is really Secrets of Salat something that our community shouldn't already know about head to toe? These are like the basics of our faith, right? And it's not our community's fault. It's like there's a lot of different factors involved in it, right? My point is if someone asked me what's like the 50-year plan, I don't have anything to give you like written down like a 50-year plan, but I do know those areas that are severely lacking. and steps that you can take, right now to make a change and bring about, a better future. Emphasis on knowledge, right? We put together this presentation. It's like a 100-slide presentation. A lot of it is photos, though. It's not all information and everything, but we put it together for the local community here, trying to explain a little bit about what we wanted to do as part of City of Knowledge that was a bit unique, right, in the way we approach, preaching Islam in the West. And there was five main challenges that I highlighted. I said these 5 main challenges are challenges that the majority of our communities in the West, to be honest, Shia and Sunni, deal with, right?
Yeah.
And number 1 was a lack of emphasis on knowledge, where there's more emphasis on ritual, where there should be balance, but they're not balanced. Number 2 was the role of the alim. Like, the alim usually in our organization doesn't have much of a role. He's just like, he's just there and they tell him what to do and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Number 3 is the role of sisters and their representation and how the programs are catered towards them, or lack thereof. Number 4 was the role of, or rather the lack of programming for our younger generation and our youth, right? Mm-hmm. And spending time with them and having activities for them and so on and so, helping them build bonds amongst themselves and all that kind of stuff. And then I think there's a 5th one I've forgotten right now. But these are things that are lacking right now, and as long as we can take steps in this regard, slowly, I think that overall plan will start to present itself. I think the Shia school of thought is still very, very young in its attempts to propagate its message in this part of the world. Very, very young. I mean, I don't even think we've scratched the surface yet. So slowly, I think we can get there.
Well, we're barely 3 generations in. So
yeah, exactly.
So there's a long work to do. But we thank you for the work that you do and the work that Mizan and City of Knowledge do, and Yatik al-Afiyah for all of the efforts, inshallah. Those of you watching, I hope you appreciate as much as me to have Sheikh Mahdi on. Alhamdulillah, I'm so grateful for those points that you mentioned. And thank you to yourself, the listeners. We go live every night. Tomorrow, when there's no podcast, by the way, apologies. I'm giving a lecture in London, and then I'm on Ahl Bayt TV, so no lecture tomorrow. But inshallah, following day we carry on until Eid. Keep going, full steam ahead.
Whoever has the stamina, keep going with Abbas. But I mean, I'm like dead, but
you've got like an hour left till the end of your fast is nearly done. You've got like what, an hour, 2 hours?
No, we got 2 hours. Yeah.
All right. So after Eid, after iftar, you'd be more like, I want to come on again. I want to come on tomorrow.
After iftar, it's time to prepare for the next lecture. There's no time. Yeah,
that's true. Well, listen, if you're in London anytime soon, let me know and we'll do this in person. Inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much.
Take care, Agha. See you soon. Of course, always, Sheikhna. And to everyone else, take us in your du'as as well. Take care, ma'asalam. And we'll see you day after tomorrow, inshallah, on Monthly Reflections podcast. Yeah, you won't want to miss that one. Fi amanillah, ma'asalam.